welcome to the Week 5 edition of the Line Survivor podcast. I'm Matt Brown, joined each and every week by Steven Andrus, and if you're still with us, congrats! You are still in Survivor, at least you care about what's going on over in Survivor. That's more to be said than about 75% of people that are out there. Most of these contests down to about the final 20 to 25% of participants, Steven, because we did have a big time 2 weeks of major upsets. Not so much this past week, at least none that were super popular when it came to Survivor, but there is a part of this week which leads me to believe that maybe this might be a week where we see another, 5, 10, 15% of people get wiped out.
Never know, right? Never know. I mean, if you look at week 4, we had a couple of close calls, right? Philadelphia going to overtime, Kansas City Chiefs, a little dicey there for a while, even though they were playing Zach Wilson. So we get by the hair on our chinny chin, and we move forward here. Doesn't matter if you win by 1 or 30. All that matters is you survive and advance.
That's all we're looking at. We usually talk about the teams that are 6-point or more favorites here on the pod as maybe some obvious options. Those are limited this week. We have the Commanders and the Bears, but that is a Thursday night football game. Commanders are 6.5-point favorites in that one. The Lions are now 9-point favorites over the Carolina Panthers. And then we have the Dolphins that are 10.5-point favorites over the New York Giants after the New York Giants. Do we call it a performance on Monday night this past week, Steve? I guess we'll call it a performance. It was something. Man. It was something, yeah. Outside of that, we are really outside of the threshold for what we usually do. There are a couple of 6s available in the Bills over the Jags, but that one's kind of ping-ponging back and forth between 5.5 and 6. So as far as the big options go, and I think you'd have to be really, really, really confident or have maybe like if you're in the circle contest, maybe you have 10 entries left and you want to use a couple on the Commanders because, again, yes, the Bears might be the worst team in the NFL. There's arguments to be had about that. Our power ratings will be out later today over at thelines.com. But the Commanders are still a team in which you're never going to feel great about hitting the button to submit for them.
100%. Yeah, but the market says they're about a 6.5, 7-point favorite as we record on Tuesday morning here. Whether or not they cover is a very different conversation than Survivor, and we're just asking them to win, right? I actually have bet the Bears to cover 7 in this game, plugged my nose because I just don't think the Commanders should be 7-point favorites over literally anybody in the league, and I don't think they would be other than the Chicago Bears at this point, to be honest with you. I think it's pretty clear the market has either the Bears or the Panthers as the worst team in the NFL at this juncture a month into the season. With that being said, Matt, I think a lot of people probably have already used the Commanders from the old beginning of the season, fade the Cardinals no matter what situation. So if that's the case, then we probably need to give them a couple other choices. But for what it's worth, at least right now, if you look at the ESPN Eliminator Challenge early in the week, and these numbers fluctuate. Most people don't put their picks until later in the week, but as of right now, less than 5% of people are taking the Commanders on Thursday night. So that's a pretty decent play if those numbers hold. If you want the full ownership numbers across all of the big national pools to give you a better idea, we've partnered with Pool Genius. The link to subscribe is down in the description. They do fantastic work, not only on ownership projections, but they'll give you the maximum expected value path and map out all the teams for you. They'll also give you, if you just want the best percentage to get to the end and don't care if you're going to have to maybe split the winnings with anybody, they'll give you that path as well. So link down in the description, but at least in terms of projected ownership, the Commanders may fit the mold here if you don't mind backing a non-elite team this week.
Yeah, you can definitely pick on 2 of the bottom teams in the NFL with the Lions and the Dolphins this week because they get the Panthers and the Giants respectively. The Giants are one of 2 teams in the NFL to not take an offensive snap with a lead this year, the other being the Jets. So if you're in New York, you hadn't seen a lead yet in any of the games that you've been watching, and so they find themselves 10.5. This moves all the way through the 10, Stephen. This was 9 in favor of the Dolphins. This moves all the way through the 10 as we sit here on Tuesday after that performance we get from the Giants last night. And Carolina Panthers just don't have a lot of talent. They just don't have a lot of guys out there. The defense is what we thought was going to be good is actually not. And then the Lions seem to be humming. And then not only that, get Jamison Williams back this week.
The Panthers are just broken. I mean, they score 14 points, and 7 of them were off of a pick six 100 yards the other way that Kirk Cousins threw. So their quarterback's broken. They played one of the worst defenses in the NFL and still couldn't get anything going. Now they play a Lions defense that's among the best in the league at getting pressure without blitzing. But this is going to be probably the most popular pick in pools this week. I would be surprised if it's not, considering what we've seen from the Lions. They're kind of a darling of the NFL at this point. Everybody's out on the Panthers offense, and rightfully so. But I'll tell you why in a couple of minutes here, Matt, why typically I try to just blanket avoid the most popular team in Survivor, but there's something interesting happening this week that may have me make an exception this week, because there's a team I think has a very good chance to lose that for whatever reason is getting big time ownership this week.
Yeah, so for me, if you look, I think a lot of people are going to look at the Dolphins. Anytime you see the Giants, it's a standalone game. It's Monday Night Football. All eyes on the Giants. Everybody was watching them just trip all over themselves on Monday night. And so we see, of course, from a money perspective in the betting market, in comes the money on the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins will be somewhat popular this week, but I think that would be people not really taking a look at, oh, by the way, next week they play the Panthers. So, like, if you're sitting here going, man, I don't want to miss this opportunity to play against the Giants. Well, you're going to get an opportunity with this very team next week against the Panthers. So that is still on your plate for options. They still play the Raiders. They still play the Jets. They still play the Jets twice, I should say. They still play the Commanders. There are a lot of options for this Dolphins squad, Steven. So for me, for one of the first ones to scratch off, just mainly because I can use them next week and feel very comfortable, at home against the Panthers. And so there's really no reason for me to use them this week against the Giants when we have a couple of other options.
My overall opinion of the NFL a week into the season is that I don't think there's a middle class in the NFL this year, to be quite honest with you. I think there's like 7 or 8 teams that are pretty solid, pretty comfortable with them any given week against the lower class of the NFL. And I think the Dolphins and the Lions are 2 of those teams. Can they beat the elite teams in the NFL? I'm not so sure of that. We just saw the Dolphins get spanked by Buffalo. But when they go down in class, so to speak, I think there's a pretty solid gap between them and the bottom half of the league. And certainly the Giants and the Panthers are in that bottom half of the league. We kind of saw this last year when the Eagles played the Giants. And the Giants were competitive. They're a punchy team. They make the playoffs. But when they have to go up in class, they just don't have the talent to compete in games like that. So that's kind of where I feel the Dolphins are at. I'm not scared off by them in most weeks just because they looked bad and lost by 4 touchdowns to the Buffalo Bills, who may be the best team in the NFL at this point.
The Bills are going to end up beating a lot of teams by 20 points this year.
That's right. That's right.
So one of the things that's interesting to me is from the Lions' perspective, and the reason why the Lions are the number one choice for me is after the Panthers, listen, at the Bucs are just spunky enough, and it's a road game. You don't want to play them there. At the Ravens can only be healthier than they are today by the time that game rolls around, because the Ravens are about the most beat up team in the NFL already. So then you're not even considering them again, really, until the home game at the Raiders. So we're looking a month down the road as to when we would want to be using them again. And Steven, listen, we already mentioned there's only 25% of people left in your pool as it is anyway, right? So if I could use the Lions this week, feel comfortable, move on with them where I wouldn't be considering them again for a month anyway, I that's why to me, Lions seem very, very clear to me as the number one choice.
I completely agree with you. And this is the reason why I'm not scared off by playing them, even though they're the most popular team. Most weeks I go by game theory. I'm not going to pick the most popular team. But for whatever reason, Matt, the second most popular team right now, at least in the ESPN national pool, is the Cincinnati Bengals at more than 20% picked against the Arizona Cardinals this week. I don't get it, man. Like this, if you look at the market, this was about 6 on the look ahead. It reopened around 4.5 in a span of 12 hours between Monday morning and Monday evening. It went all the way down to the key number of 3. I mean, you and I talked about, we're not 100% sure Joe Burrow's playing in this game. I think he's more likely to play than not. But even if he is, I don't know if anybody watched that game against the Titans and not just the box score, but he was a sitting duck back there.
Yeah.
They just sent A gap blitz after A gap blitz, and he got like WWE finishing moved like 3 times in that game. So this is not the same Bengals. I'm not comfortable playing them any week to win a game at this point until we see something different from them. And the Arizona Cardinals are not the worst team in the NFL. Like, using that strategy we talked about before the season is out the window at this point. The Cardinals are very competitive. I was actually, in some ways, even more impressed by the Cardinals in their loss to the 49ers than I was in their win against Dallas, because I thought the 49ers defense, with extra rest at home, saw what they did against Arizona, beating Dallas, and would be ready for them. And yes, the offense did what they want, but also the defense of the 49ers really was not all that impressive against the Arizona offense. I'm impressed by the Arizona offense at this point. Above average yards per play on the season, above average net yards per play. So they are getting more yards per play on offense than their defense is allowing. So I think this is a very dangerous team any given week against that non-upper class of the NFL.
Yeah, I'm way more comfortable playing against the Giants, playing against the Bears, playing against the Panthers, to a lesser extent playing against even the Broncos. There are these teams in which the defenses just don't exist at all. And so I will always rather play against those type of teams when it comes to all this. And like I said, Arizona's just been just enough to where I don't really want to go after them a ton. If we look, Cincinnati, guys, if you're able to change your pick, if you put that in, that's a bad pick.
Please just change it. Do not play Cincinnati.
Yeah, there's a non-zero chance Joe Burrow's not going to play. Also, it doesn't really matter because he's playing at about 60% right now, and 60% of Joe Burrow isn't good enough, and it's just not going to be for the rest of the season until they decide to sit him down for 2 or 3 weeks and let this thing actually heal up. There's just no chance that this team is going to be like comfortable to play every week, no matter who they're up against. It doesn't matter, because when you limit what Burrow does as a quarterback, which is he's sneaky, slippery, he knows when to stand up, he has a great feel for the pocket, he knows when to kind of just slide over, he's able to pick up those little 3rd and 3s sometimes with his legs, and that's what makes this team so good. He has none of that right now. Literally, he has absolutely none of it. He can't do any of it. And so it's not a comfortable pick at all. If we look at some of these fringe picks, Chiefs and Vikings, that would be the scariest play of the week for me. I mean, listen, the Vikings offense is just good enough to give everybody fits. Yeah, the defense is garbage, and yeah, this turnover thing in the red zone is literally LOL funny at this point. But let's be for real. Like, their offense is good enough to give anybody fits. Like, I can't imagine feeling comfortable about putting the Chiefs in against the Vikings. And then the other one that we were talking about with the Bills and the Jags. I mean, yeah, we just said the Bills look like a truck, and there's no doubt about that, but it's a London game. London games could be weird. Jacksonville got to stay over there this week after playing last week. The Bills had to make the
key,
travel.
Matt. Like, we haven't seen that before. We've never seen a team play back-to-back games in London. They don't have to deal with the travel situation, and the Bills do. So we don't know what that's going to look like, even though we haven't been impressed by the Jags this year.
Yeah, to me, it's just too many. Like, so what we've talked about, Stephen, from the very beginning of us starting to do this podcast 3 years ago, was like, take out as many variables as possible, if at all possible, for us. Like, we don't want to play if a quarterback is kind of injured. We don't want to play in these weird travel spot deals. We don't want to play in these. Well, for me, like, the Bills very well could go over there and look pedestrian, and it strictly be because they made them go play a game in London. Like, I mean, it's just like, and it has nothing to do with the Bills not being good or being less good than you and I think that they are, or any of that. It's just, hey, it's odd to have to get on a plane and go over and play a game in London where it's none of the food is familiar, none of the you're on a different time schedule, like all that stuff is just weird. And so I would
want to hear the weirdest thing, by the way.
Yeah.
Just real quick sidebar. The weirdest thing was so the Jags get to play 2 weeks in London, but for whatever stupid logistical reason, they have to leave their hotel that they were in for the Falcons game and go to a different hotel, and the Bills now get the hotel the Jags were in. Like, how does that make sense? Maybe do that differently next year, NFL, but I digress.
That's absolutely beautiful. Here's the other one that is like, I'm guessing if we get word for sure that Kenny Pickett's going to be out, that Ravens line probably moves to 5.5 or 6 in favor of the Ravens. They're still so beat up. It's a road game. I don't think very high. I don't think very highly of Mitch Trubisky, but like, it's just, again, it's road game, still beat up. Do they win? Most likely, but nothing that I really would feel super comfortable about putting in the account.
And let's just make sure we keep the Ravens in proper context here, even though they have some impressive wins. They beat CJ Stroud in his first NFL start with a banged up offensive line. They beat a compromised Joe Burrow by 3 points. They beat a game they actually lost in overtime, and it was close to Gardner Minshew. And then they beat a backup quarterback in Cleveland. So this is not an impressive 3-1 to begin with. Let's just keep that in mind. And they're playing a very tough divisional opponent that knows them better than anybody. And with what Kenny Pickett has looked like so far this year, I mean, would it shock anybody if Mitch Trubisky actually looked a little bit better with his mobility? So just be careful with the Ravens.
Yeah, for me, like I said, Lions number 1 with a bullet for me this week. Commanders would be number 2. And in a very distant third would be the Dolphins. And I only say that because, again, the Dolphins get the Panthers next week, right? And you already have that scheduled. You already have that on the calendar. You can do that. That's one that you'd feel great about putting in your account. So for me, it's kind of like it's 1, 2, and then a very, very distant third this week.
We're basically aligned here. I think Lions number 1, teardrop from there for me. Mm-hmm. And then probably Dolphins and then Commanders instead of Commanders number 2. You're a little bit more risk averse than I am. So I'm still hesitant to play the Commanders against really anybody because they're still learning. They're still trying to figure out offense, young quarterback who's gotten sacked a ton and can turn it over. So, it's more in the range of outcomes I think that they lose than the Dolphins do, but I certainly hear your point that the Dolphins get the Panthers next week as well. So we have the same
like if we're trying to play. Yeah, it's like if we're trying to play to win, I just think it's one of those, like, the Dolphins have so much value as to where the Commanders really have almost none after this week, because I would probably only feel good about playing the Commanders against the Bears. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if I'd feel good about playing them ever again this season.
And a lot of people listening may have already used the Commanders, and then, the option's simple for you at that point. So, but the point is well made with the Lions. Like, even though they're impressive, they get the Panthers this week, but are you going to feel really comfortable playing the Lions over the next month against Tampa Bay, Baltimore, Las Vegas, if Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs are healthy, a bye week so you can't use them, and then the Chargers after that? So it's a long time before that Bears game in week 11.
Yep. Let's just make it there, guys. Let's just make it there, especially considering, again, if you're left, you're only up against a handful of people relative to where any of these pools started, because they've all just been absolutely decimated. So 1, good on you, and 2, let's not get too crazy this week. Let's go ahead. The Lions will get this done. Again, Jameson Williams back in there is only going to help an offense that's already been really good so far this year. So I really do like the Lions this week. That is the obvious play. Of course, you can read all of the articles that will be supporting what we have to say over at thelions.com. Everything you do absolutely free. So if you have not done this so far, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and then let us know in the comments section who is your Survivor play of the week, and who is the team that is going to end up biting the most people this week as well over in Survivor. For Steven, I'm Matt. Good luck on all your week 5 Survivor picks.
Don't play the Bengals.